Knock, knock, knock. Jack tapped on the apartment door slowly, finishing the pattern of 5 long, 3 short, 1 long, then 2 short they had used earlier that night, just loud enough for the occupant to hear, as the others leaned against the walls, tired but still awake enough for this. They kept quiet as they heard movement on the other side of the door. Jack kept his eye on the peephole as they heard from the other side, "Oh shit!" That was everything Jack needed to hear. The human booted the door right off its hinges, before it landed on the unfortunate Slicer, who practically shat himself as he stared into the eyes of the pissed-off Death Welder, standing atop him. Security! The Slicer tried to yell to activate the droids and turrets, before Jack quickly took them all out with surgically precise shots, with the rest of the group barely entering after him before all threats were neutralized. "How much did they pay you to tell them where we would be?" Jack quietly asked, as he leveled his Dominator right at the Slicer's head. I'm sorry," the Slicer cried out. "I didn't mean to." Jack immediately fired, unleashing a photon blast on the ground, right next to the Slicer's ear. "That was a lie," Allura coldly pointed out. "You definitely meant to." "But please don't kill me," the Slicer sobbed, begging for his life. "Your rep was pretty good," Sephi added. "Why throw that away?" "A lot of dangerous people have been making threats, and you went to the Pallid Pit!" The Slicer's eyes bulged as he panicked. "And the Drow House sent special forces. They're personal assassins, and they've made a deal with Dr. Grind himself. I thought you'd be dead anyway. And if they found out I helped you, I'd be too." "Clearly we're not dead," Nika deadpanned, unimpressed. "Please don't kill me," the Slicer yelled. "I'll give you anything you want. Money? Drugs? Information?" "What about that?" Jack pointed at the shuttle in the back. The rest of the group smiled wickedly at that idea. "This shuttle is almightily shit," Nika groaned as she looked through it. It really was pretty much a skeleton, barely more than a metal frame with flimsy engines strapped to the back and underside, though it did at the very least have a panel at the front to control it. "Looks like it's been almost completely chopped up for parts." "Will it fly?" Allura asked, as she and Chio checked through the Slicer's inventory, having negotiated a suitable recompense from them, in exchange for not killing them or publicly ruining their reputation. "Just about," Nika sighed, "but we'll all need to tie ourselves on." "We could always walk back," Jack pointed out from where he was standing, with Sephi and the terrified-looking Slicer. "Might be safer," Nika shrugged, "though I think most of us are spent for tonight, and it should be fine for at least getting back. I can fly it, but I'll need help to do it, so we might as well all go." "Do what you can. Jack can help you once he's done covering Sephi," Allura replied with a reassuring nod. "Sure, I can stand by with words of encouragement," Jack retorted, to chuckles from the others. "How are you doing, Sephi?" He spoke a little quieter to the Skritter sat in the Slicer's chair, leaning over the tied-up and gagged owner lying on the floor. "Oh yeah, I've got a bunch of shady shit here he's not going to want out," she grinned. "He's definitely not going to try and turn on us again. Removed his markers on the ship too." "Excellent," Jack grinned, as he looked to the captive Slicer and addressed them. "Look, on the plus side, mate, we can pretend this went very well for all parties. Not only will your reputation not be harmed, but you're a big reason why the cult of the Destroyer at the Pallid Pit got decimated. Possibly permanently this time." The Slicer mumbled something through his gag, and Jack quickly tore the cloth off. "What's that, mate?" "How in the name of unholy fuck are you people even alive?" they asked in shock. "Nah, we've dealt with worse," Sephi grinned, as she finished what she was doing on the console. "We're done here." "Not yet," Jack whispered back, so only the 3 of them could hear. "Tell me," he looked to the Slicer, motioning Sephi to come closer. "What do the marks mean?" "Marks?" the Slicer asked, a little confused. "Like the one outside your door," Jack replied patiently, as he saw sudden recognition in his eyes. "Sephi and I have found a bunch of others around the city. We know a bit, but not enough." The Slicer looked conflicted as he looked between the two, before starting to relent. "Okay, I can tell you what I know," he whispered, looking around to make sure nobody else was listening in. "Only reason I know a little is because someone else brought me into it. That's how it works. He told me a few of the basic signs and where to find them, and I went from there." What for? Sephi asked, eyes wide with excitement. Look, I don't know how deep this goes, but this is all about clandestine shit. Fences for stolen goods, information brokers, system slicing, that kind of stuff. You get in the know and you get into that shit. I get contracted by complete strangers wanting slicing services and no questions asked, and can make inquiries with others in the circle. And now we're involved with it, Jack pointed out. The security of the whole thing can't be that great. But it is, the slicer replied excitedly. I've heard of others in the circle disappear, never to be seen again after talking too much, trying to bring in the wrong people or doing something stupid. They police themselves. You two should be fine since you played the game and noticed them on your own. But what about what the signs mean? Sephi asked. What's your circle with 2 parallel lines outside your door mean? That's the basic affiliate sign, the slicer confirmed. Put it up outside your residence and in your electronic signature, and other affiliates will notice you, and people will contact you. We might just do that, Jack grinned. Do you know any others? Never bother checking. I rarely travel outside my sanctum and I have no need to, the slicer sighed. Jack got the impression they were deliberately trying to build up rapport with them, clearly sufficiently afraid and wanting to stay alive. We'll learn more as we go then, Sephi shrugged, as she unslotted herself from the system. Jack? You okay to help me lift some stuff? Nika called over. On my way, Jack called back, as he walked over, checking his pack. Is everyone secure? Nika asked the others, as they all held on to their designated spots on the shuttle chassis. It really was bare bones, but Jack found it surprisingly light as he lifted up the back end of the shuttle, with Dante looking slightly nervous lying down on what remained of the engine to help balance the weight of the thing. Jack had gone around using the rope he took with him, creating as secure a rigging as he possibly could with the climbing rope, and used the rest to fix up lifelines for the rest of the group, using a few carabiners to make sure they couldn't accidentally be jerked off. Sephi especially needed this in order to be able to keep an eye on power balancing for the engines, sitting up front with Nika, who she would help in piloting the thing. Alora and Chio were on the sides, by far the most tired out of the group as their stims began to wear off, but still able to cast whatever cloaking and protection spells they needed for the short but risky trip back. Jack had tied them, and Dante as securely as he could, just in case they couldn't hold on. Which left barely anything to keep him attached. While he had volunteered to be the one to move around and manually troubleshoot any issues with the thrusters, he really had no idea what the hell he was doing, and was praying he wouldn't need to actually do any maintenance work on the fly. Sephi instructed the slicer to open the roof hatch, which they did without complaint. Though they had betrayed them to the drow, Jack got the impression that they would remain cooperative going forward, out of sheer fear if nothing else. The group hadn't really taken anything from them, apart from the shuttle, some files and a few spare parts, so the slicer wouldn't end up resenting them either. It was perhaps a light punishment, but the group agreed that they would be a good contact to keep. I hope we can do business in future, Alora smiled, as she turned to the slicer, who just stared blankly at the group with the biggest WTF expression Jack had ever seen, barely having the presence of mind to numbly nod. Lifting now, Nika called out, as Jack and Dante felt the engines rumble beneath them. We're all right, boy. Jack ruffled the ears of the dog as they slowly began to ascend, Jack using his feet to gently push the craft away from the back wall. According to Chio, the thrusters didn't produce heat like he expected, rather working on force alone, which in theory would let him move around them without getting hurt. The thought of it still sucked, though. But up they still went, as Nika carefully boosted the underside thrusters, slowly elevating the craft to the hatch. Jack's ass clenched as he cautiously got up and moved around, prodding the shuttle into position as Nika carefully tried to get past the hatch, with Sephi carefully manipulating the amount of the thrust to avoid spinning out. With one final push from Jack, the craft made it past the lip of the hatch, and they were free. With no objects to collide with, the shuttle quickly stabilized in mid-air, and suddenly the worries of the group subsided. It reminded Jack of a hot air balloon, a ride on which he had gone on once when he was very young, although the basket he was in back then at least had a floor and a safety railing. The cool night breeze gently tickled his face as he looked down at the empty streets, the glow of light shining on the various districts below, painting a unique canvas of abstract displays that clashed and crashed into each other. The diversity of the districts contrasting, yet somehow looking natural in its own way. It was beautiful. "Keep it as low down as you can and don't go too fast," Allura called to Nika, as she clung tightly to her bare metal pole, the Kizan acknowledging with a simple nod. "How are you holding up, Chio?" "No traffic coming anywhere near us, though I've had to direct some flocks of birds away," Chio replied. "Can we really not go faster? It's cold." "Better cold than shorting the engines," Allura cheekily replied. "How are they looking, Jack?" Jack began, not knowing what to even look for. "They look the same and we haven't dropped out of the sky, so I assume we're good for now." "Yeah, we're all good," Sephi grinned. "Systems are old and not the most efficient, but they'll get us home unless you think Jack should go underneath and check the bottom." Jack took a half-second recoiling in shock, before realizing that Sephi was just joking. "Pan to the right a little if you can," Allura called out to Nika. "We're heading in the right direction, but we keep drifting, and we don't have a lot of fuel." "Up, down, and forwards works, but we don't have the best means to turn," Nika called back. "What if we redistribute the weight?" Jack asked, thinking of how blimps and boats sometimes worked. Then cursed at himself, as he realized this would likely be more risky work for him, as the others were tied securely to their places. "That'll work," Allura called back. "Sorry, Jack. Could you be our rudder?" "Why did I have to open my mouth?" Jack grumbled, with only Dante hearing, and looking concerned as the human made some mental calculations in his head, before moving towards the right-hand side of the shuttle and leaning out, forcing that side down and turning the shuttle to the right, though Jack had to quickly scramble to the other side to help stabilize it and stop it from tipping over. "That'll do it for now. We should be on course." Allura checked her device. "Might need some more adjustments when we get closer and come to land." "As long as we get home, I'm settling down wherever," Nika replied. "We could probably carry this thing once we're on the ground." "Screw doing that tonight," Sephi replied, and the group nodded in agreement. "It won't be doing any harm wherever we leave it, as long as you don't destroy the house or my garden," Allura called back over the ever-increasing wind. "In the long term, we can cover it with a tarp, or maybe take it to one of the abandoned properties." "Let's worry about that when we have a chance to relax," Chio replied, as she hugged the metal frame as tightly as she could. "You okay, Chio?" Jack asked, concerned. "Are you able to use your powers to float alongside us?" "Levitation isn't like flight. It gets more difficult the further away I am from solid ground, though not impossible. I can sort of influence and reduce the external forces on the craft as a bubble around myself, but levitation is a bit more complex." "We've got time. How does it work?" Chio smiled. "You're just trying to distract me from thinking about how high up we are, aren't you?" "Yup," Jack grinned, "though I need the distraction too. How's the leg?" "Feels numb and cold more than painful now. I'm a little woozy, but I don't think I'll fall unconscious. Allura's healed me enough that I'm not actively bleeding." "Ideally, you should keep your leg elevated above heart level, but at least you haven't been walking much on it," Jack replied, trying to remember what he knew about first aid. "When we get back, you should lie down and rest it on a pillow." "Not before I eat something. I'm starving," Yelithy replied with a smile, and Jack realized he was too, as he nodded in agreement. Though they had eaten their dinner several hours previously, they had gone through a lot since then. Allura had deliberately cooked leftovers for them to eat once they got back, but he would be lying if he didn't want to order takeaway or raid whatever snacks were lying around. "Hey guys," Jack called. "Injury check." "Sore and stiff," Allura called back. "Quite tired too. I'll need to rest and replenish my magic soon." "Itchy as hell. We'll need to replace bandages when we get back," Nika replied. "Stims are probably wearing off for those that took them." "Only a few bumps and scrapes for me," Sephi called back. "Just a little tired." "How are you doing, boy?" Jack asked Dante, who softly panted from his spot on the engine. Still several cuts from the fight with the skin-sore slashers, and he had taken several shots too, which the battle skins had fortunately absorbed. He himself was able to keep it together. He had taken heavy cuts and gunfire during the run, but he was content to tough out his wounds until Allura was able to recharge her healing spells. He would gladly fall asleep at the first opportunity he got, but would not do so until the others were safe. It was about half an hour later before Alora's directions to both him and Nika got more frequent, as they approached their home district. The crisscross of walls, settlements and unexplored zones meshed together in a blur, and it was only when Chio had pinged the wards that Jack finally began to see the familiar sight of home. "Taking it down as gently as I can," Nika warned. "We'll be in our district, but I have no counterthrusters to heartbreak." "Try not to make it a crash landing," Sephi retorted. "After all the effort we put into getting it here." "Trying," Nika called back. "Any ideas?" "Take it as close to the ground as you can," Jack replied, thinking quickly and holding the end of the rope tied to the ship. "If I can dig in and pull back, that should throw us some of the momentum." "Wall coming up," Alora warned, as Jack quickly leaped off and dug in his heels as best he could, still being dragged along by the shuttle as it came down to land, getting yanked off the top of the wall for his troubles. Using all of his strength to hang on to the rope, he barely noticed thumping into the roof of their home, but he had the presence of mind to dig in again and pull back. The shuttle was moving much slower now, and was better controlled as Jack was pulled off the roof to dangle over the ground once more, before finding his feet for one last time as he yanked on the rope, finally pulling the shuttle to a stop just outside one of the abandoned buildings, as Sephi efficiently reduced thrust on the underside, slowly and safely lowering the shuttle so everybody could hop off, before Nika killed the power, letting the ship drop half a meter onto the grass, once everyone else was clear with an undignified thump. "Everyone all right?" Nika asked, groaning as she got up and stressed her numb limbs. "Sephi's better at driving than I am, but I hope it wasn't too bumpy." "I never want to do that again," Chio replied with a shudder as she floated in the air. "Next time we're flying, the shuttle's got to at least have a floor." "And brakes," Jack added, clutching his hands in pain for the rope burn, or at least an anchor. Dante barked in agreement, walking around on the ground as if testing how solid it was. "Well, at least we got it here," Alora sighed. "Despite its condition, it's an excellent asset to have." "It will need a lot of work, but it'll be great once I weld some panels on," Nika grinned, positively salivating over the prospect. "But right now we need to recover," Alora interjected, waving everyone to the house. "I, for one, need to rest, as I'm sure the rest of us do." "And we need to go through the loot," Sephi excitedly added, eyes wide with excitement. "R&R first," Jack sighed, as they all trundled over to the house. "Everyone sit down and I'll heat up the leftover soup." "I think this calls for celebratory snacks and wine too," Chio proposed to the group. "I think it does." Alora gave a weak smile in agreement. "Here you go." Jet began passing the bowls of leftover soup over to the girls, who were all mostly sitting or lying down on the sofa. He had wasted no time in making sure various injured body parts were elevated and bandages were fixed properly. Anywhere that was sprained or bruised had some cold bags of food from the freezer applied to reduce the swelling, at least until Alora was able to look at it once she was rested up. Jack really hoped he remembered his basic first aid correctly, but by the way the girls were looking comfortable, and the wounds not as terrible looking, he figured they were in the clear for tonight. "There's a special blend of tea in the cupboard that'll help," Alora groaned as she moved to get up, but was gently pushed back by Jack as he handed her bowl of soup to her. "I'll get it," Jack smiled. "Just tell me where it is." "That cupboard, blue pot." Alora pointed vaguely in the right direction. "No, up one. That's it." "Can Dante have some?" Jack asked, as he poured the instant boiling water into his prepared teapot. "Should be safe for him, and add it to a bowl of water to dilute and cool down," Alora replied. "It's a special blend of mine that should help a lot with sleep and recovery. We have a busy night tomorrow, and there's some things we'll need to do." "Yup. I've already sent a preliminary notice to all involved parties regarding the skin-saw slasher," Nika replied. "This is big, so they'll probably get some representatives together and get in contact with us, which will save us the trouble." "The information on the cult of the Destroyer will be useful too," Sephi added, "especially since now we know why they kept resurging around the Pallid Pit." "I'm just glad that my bounty is down," Jack sighed, as he prepared a bowl for Dante and brought the steaming pot of tea to the table. "Though the drow will still be after me, at least that's the devil we know."
After their brazen attempt failed, they may wish to obfuscate their failure
and unofficially call it off, Chia reasoned. After all, if news broke out that the kill team they sent after you were all killed, other drow houses would turn their gaze on them. It is better to officially forget about you than continue to openly appear weak. Wouldn't that be nice? Jack grinned, before his face got serious. But tonight was absolutely brutal. Same with last weekend. Although we made it out both times with stories and riches. You don't want to make that a regular occurrence. Or even better, not do that again. Alora nodded sagely. Well, we shouldn't need to, right? We know who's been messing with you, and for now at least they're no longer a local threat. And we probably have funds to last us weeks, if not months or longer. Jack gave a non-committal hum at that. Though they had been on a successful run tonight, and he was no longer in immediate danger from bounties, he wasn't convinced that this was over. I have no idea why you're so good at making teas, Jack, but I'm not complaining, Sephi grinned, as she heartily gulped down her brew. Jack was taken out of his thoughts by that. I'm still a true Brit, he grinned. We pretty much learn to brew tea before we can talk. Quite effective too, Alora yawned. I feel like I'm too tired to even get up to go to bed. Then don't, Jack replied with a small smile. I know where the blankets are, and I'm up for just dropping on the sofa. Sounds good to me, Chia replied drowsily. Got to keep the leg elevated and iced anyway. The group didn't spend too much time chatting after that, exhausted as they were. Alora and Chio had expended much of their power, and had quickly fallen asleep, propped up by many pillows and cushions. None of them had bothered shedding all of their gear, being too exhausted and just dumping their bags and easily discarded outer clothing on the ground, though Jack had helped Dante out of his custom-fitted battle skin to make sure he was comfortable, since the dog couldn't remove it himself. Both Jack and Nika had taken many nasty hits during the course of the run from skin-sore slashers, cultist leaders and drow assassins alike, though neither of them were fully willing to admit how bad they were, since they weren't life-threatening. They knew Alora would probably nag them once she woke up, and went over them with her healing magic, but as long as everyone else had been seen to, they were fine with it. For now, both were lying back on the sofa, feet on the table, with Jack occasionally scratching the Kism behind the ears, which he very much enjoyed. Sephi was cuddled up to him on the other side, and Dante was full across all three of them, enjoying frequent squitches and pets from them, careful to avoid the wounds of the poor animal. Jack had considered making a makeshift dog comb for him, but Dante seemed to be smart enough not to scratch his own injuries. He had gotten priority for what little magical healing Alora had left at the end of the night, but he was obviously still hurt. Good boy, Jack smiled, as Dante looked at him with bright eyes. Do we actually know what gender he is? Nika asked with a contented sigh. No, but I don't feel like checking, Sephi whispered back. We can add it to our list of problems. Well, at least that list isn't as bad as it was this morning, Jack reasoned as he relaxed. Yeah, Malakil of all things, Nika sighed. At least they only considered you and Devil's Daughter secondary threats. Jack sat there in silence for a moment, as a nagging feeling began to fester. Malakil hadn't been responsible for all of the strangeness the group had suffered, after all. If Jack was a secondary threat that Malakil tries so desperately hard to kill, who, or what, was Malakil's primary threat?